Almighty and most merciful God, we ask you to bless and assist our country and the industry in this area. We find that that in which we trusted is failing us. We trusted in the smartness of our industrial leaders. We trusted in the great corporations. We trusted in money. We trusted in the power of steel. We couldn't imagine that there could ever be a day that they'd be closing steel mills or that they wouldn't need steel.
Here, in the steel-making valleys around Pittsburgh, in the auto plants of Detroit, and in smokestack cities across America, our basic industries are in crisis. For generations, Americans have confidently relied on business to provide them with the highest standard of living on earth. Now, they have seen industry after industry decline. Steelworkers in this region once looked to corporations like U.S. Steel for 150,000 of the best-paying blue-collar jobs in America. Today, fewer than 40,000 of these jobs remain. Among the thousands of unemployed steelworkers here is Maureen Trout. She has been laid off for a year from her job at U.S. Steel's Homestead Works, and has little chance of ever getting her job back.
What are you forgetting?
Maureen's husband, Paul, has worked for 26 years at Mesta, once a leading maker of steel mill equipment.
I heard that instead of shutting down in December, they moved it up to October because they're out of money.
Now, at age 53, Paul has learned that he too will lose his job.
I'm a middle-aged man. No, I'm past middle age. And I'm mad. You could call me a conservative. But when a conservative like myself is ready to get pretty violent towards upsetting the system as it is, you could see that I really believe that the government better do something.
I believed in the American dream. I really thought that as long as you were willing to work, that the sky would be the limit. I mean, I didn't want anybody to give me anything for free, but I'd always figured that if I was willing to go out there and get it, it was there. But it's not there anymore.
They've gotten fired. The one girl up with structural got fired. Somebody like
Last night I turned the 11 o'clock news on, and I'm sitting there watching it. All of a sudden it showed the high-level bridge with a young man standing on the edge with his hands behind him. He was going to jump. What they said on the news was he's a 34-year-old laid-off steelworker who was run out of benefits.
Now, you wonder why somebody wants to commit suicide. I says, you let them go live a certain way for 30 years, and then you pull the rug out from underneath them. And watch what happens to their mental, emotional, their whole life falls apart.
When I got a job here, I figured, like Mike said, I'm secure, okay? I have everything going for me. Now, all of a sudden, man, I ain't got nothing. I got 9 weeks left. My house is up for sale. Nobody's buying. Nobody's got no money. And where am I going, okay? What am I going to do?
The average steel worker here truly believed in the American dream. He would gripe, he would growl, but he learned to trust the companies, and he certainly trusted the system that kept this going. You see, in the Vietnam War, these were the loyalist people they gladly sent their sons. They'd say, my folks came over from the old country and they sought the good life, and by gosh, we found it here. And we love this country. They felt that these steel mills, these great fonts of capital in which they trusted, would serve them well.
Late in the last century, the American steel corporations built a mighty industrial complex here along the banks of the Monongahela near Pittsburgh. Workers flocked from Eastern Europe and the rural South to find in these mills opportunities denied them at home. From these furnaces, steel workers rolled the rails and girders which spanned the continent and lifted up great cities. U.S. Steel became the nation's first billion-dollar corporation. As the companies prospered, they reinvested their profits in ever more efficient equipment. This investment was a key ingredient to their success. By 1950, an American steel worker could produce 5 times as much steel in an hour as he could in 1900. The American steel worker became the most productive on Earth. But while productivity increased, steel workers' wages remained low and working conditions hazardous. For 50 years, steel workers and their unions battled the companies. In time, they won the 8-hour day, health benefits, and among the highest industrial wages in the world.
Gradually here, as the union contracts improved and as work continued, the standard of living became very high. A steel worker, an ordinary steel worker, became a man who lived rather well. He felt that the man at the top was doing his business, and they felt, in the matter of investments, that the corporations knew what they were doing, and management had its role and the worker had his role.
During the affluent post-war years, working Americans came to assume that private corporations could always be trusted to make the investments they depended on for jobs and prosperity.
Industry on Parade, produced on film each week by the National Association of Manufacturers.
There has never been anything like the America of today, a nation so productive that the typical worker's family is able to afford conveniences and luxuries available only to the privileged few elsewhere.
And what of the future? By the time the family automobile can be fitted with detachable wings, a time that may be closer than we think, it's possible that the average American's income could rise by 50%. That's actually the prediction for the next 10 years. And there's every reason in the world to believe it will come true if we can hold in check threats to the profits on which industry depends for growth.
I think the American dream became a little cloudy.
All the American dream means to me is make a living, have a good family, live a decent life.
It's being shattered now. I just pray that we'll be able to manage. And, you know, I'm concerned about our children and their...
Print your name up there and sign on the bottom. Do you have a blue card, sir?
Eggs.
I never thought I'd see the day when our steel workers would be standing in line. I mean, we've always worked here. As long as there's jobs, we work them.
How did America's once powerful steel industry decline until today it can offer jobs for only a fraction of its former workforce? After World War II, American companies were so efficient they could pay the world's highest wages and still make the lowest cost steel. But since they dominated the world market and were making record profits, they saw little reason to make major investments in new technologies. Meanwhile, foreign steelmakers were rebuilding their mills using the more efficient technological breakthroughs American companies ignored, breakthroughs which were revolutionizing steelmaking. In the mid-50s, an American steel worker could produce more than 3 times as much steel in an hour as his Japanese counterpart. By the mid-70s, Japanese productivity had surpassed us. We had lost our technological lead, and lower-cost imported steel captured up to 23% of the domestic market. Today, American basic steel averages the oldest equipment on Earth.
Well, here at Homestead, we are using a Band-Aid approach to everything. It seems like the welders and the baling wire is holding everything together.
Out of an 8-hour turn, we can produce steel for 5, and the rest of the time we're screwing around trying to repair the old, antiquated equipment to keep it running. We cannot be expected to take and compete with them when they have the modern methods and the modern equipment.
The physical facilities of the plant were crumbling to such an extent that we was arguing with the company, why don't you fix this and why don't you fix that, because it's costing you money. Because steam leaks and electric cords and buildings were leaking and everything. You know, we were negotiating with the company to try to get their facilities fixed.
I think really the steel industry was on the decline about 10 years ago. People just didn't want to believe it, you know? They never did anything to rebuild the place. They never made any effort to find other companies to get the materials from. They just didn't care.
What they're really doing, they're running it like an old car. They're going to keep it going. They're not going to put new tires on it. And when it quits, they're going to abandon it.
Now, a Steel City News special report.
The mills from Pittsburgh to Gary, Indiana are suffering from old age. The only way to compete with foreign producers is to modernize these facilities. All the steel companies to blame for a less than an adequate modernization program.
This industry, through inadequate depreciation, outdated tax laws, low profit margins, environmental requirements, massive environmental requirements, has not had the funds that's needed to modernize as quickly as we would like to. But it's going to take improved profitability, it's going to take improved tax laws, and without those things in place, we should have no illusion that it isn't lack of desire to do those things, it's just plain lack of financial ability to do them.
During the 70s, as American industry declined, business launched a multi-million-dollar media campaign claiming that government spending and regulation had deprived them of the profits they needed to modernize.
What can be done to repair the strength of the nation's economy and restore individual freedom?
We must institute sensible new tax policies that relieve the burden on all Americans, that encourage individual savings and investment, increase the formation of capital, and stimulate the growth of the economy.
We must eliminate unnecessary regulations on businesses and individuals that stifle initiative, lower productivity, increase cost to consumers, and impede economic growth.
This is what freedom is all about. It is a spirit all Americans must get back again.
Let's get it back, America, the spirit that we knew, the pride of self. Let's shout it out, America.
If we make it profitable for industry to grow, industry will have every reason to want to grow. And economic growth is the key to the creation of new jobs. My plan will give businesses tax incentives that result in plant expansion, greater output, and more jobs. It'll remove regulations that shoot up the cost of doing business. Strong creative leadership can restore America as the mightiest industrial nation on earth.
The time is now for Reagan.
One of the reasons that I voted for Reagan is because he promised to get this country going again. Now, I always believed that what was good for General Motors or what was good for U.S. Steel or Mazda was good for me, because as long as they're in business, I'll be working. Like, if it's every man, if he works hard, is going to be all right. You don't have to look to big government to help keep you, or that, just go work. And I've always believed that idea, and that's why I voted for the guy, and I thought that's what he was going to do.
The Reagan program reasserted Americans' traditional belief that increased profits would trickle down to the rest of society in the form of new investment. It slashed government social programs like food stamps, education, and health care. At the same time, it gave corporations and wealthy investors over $50 billion each year in tax breaks, which would create jobs and modernize aging plants like Homestead.
We're supposed to spend the money for a lot of modernization.
Do you see any of it?
I haven't seen it yet.
Months after passage of President Reagan's Economic Recovery Act, steel workers had only seen more plant closings and layoffs. Maureen Trout's union local took U.S. Steel to court. They wanted to find out if the company intended to use its savings to replace Homestead's antiquated open hearth furnaces. They got their answer that same day.
I wasn't told. Nobody told me nothing. You did the same thing when the 48 shut down. You released it to the news media 2 hours earlier, then you called us in to bullshit us. I have a beeper like the management stooges, you know that. You could get in touch with me. That U.S. Steel's some goddamn corporation, I'll tell you. Well, you know, we're not going to lay over and play dead. We never do. We might take over the U.S. Steel building. Hey, I got 2,500 unemployed steel workers, you know.
In an hour and 45 minutes, the largest and most historic steel mill in the Pittsburgh area is going to pour its last heat of steel. I think that's a tragedy.
Well, I'm totally disappointed. I would try to get a stay for our membership. I know what they'll feel like because they're out of work, and jobs are hard to come by. And once you put 20 to 30 to 35 years in that open hearth, and it is hard work, and this company just disregards you.
The union is saying that the company is getting out of the steel business as far as Homestead is concerned. Do you think that is the case?
I don't think that's indicated at all.
Can't elaborate further?
No.
The corporate world and Wall Street are abuzz tonight in the wake of one of the biggest business stories to come out of Pittsburgh in a long time. United States Steel Corporation today offered to buy the Marathon Oil Company for $6.6 billion. It would be the second biggest merger in corporate history.
When Ronald Reagan got elected president, U.S. Steel told him, they says, hey, look, we're in trouble. We need money. We need capital to modernize our mills. Once we modernize our mills, we'll be competitive. Reagan passed a law called the Economic Recovery Tax Act, which saved U.S. Steel an annual increase in their capital of $1.5 billion. All of this was done under the auspices that this money would go into modernization. And what did U.S. Steel do? They bought Marathon Oil.
And shut our open hearth and our blast furnace down here.
They make money, then they're happy to make money.
You're in business to make money, but what is
free.
a fair profit? I mean, just exactly how much profit do they have to have in order for us to stay open?
As much as they
Corporate greed. That's what our problem is.
3 years into the Reagan program, steel industry employment had fallen nearly an additional 50%. Despite a decade of concessions from both Republican and Democratic administrations, import controls, tax cuts, environmental deregulation, the steel corporations were actually investing less than half in 1982 what they had in 1968.
If I, as a steel analyst, saw that U.S. Steel was committing billions of dollars to either modernize its old plants in the Northeast or to spend a similar amount of money developing a brand new steel mill, then I think I would recommend that our clients sell the stocks and the bonds of the steel company.
You know, when you're comparing a 5% return in the steel business with perhaps 14% that you could earn by investing in the average manufacturing company in the United States, it just doesn't make any sense to pour money into the steel business.
U.S. Steel has responded to the demands of Wall Street by shifting its investments from steel to other more profitable industries. When plastics were booming, it bought plastics and petrochemical companies. During the real estate boom, the company bought interests in the nation's second largest shopping mall near Homestead. And a hotel at Disney World. Now, after the purchase of Marathon Oil, U.S. Steel has less than 25% of its assets remaining in the steel business.
Investment dollars, as I keep pointing out, over time, are only going to go to those investments that the shareholder can have a reasonable expectation of a fair return, which means they're going to capital starve the marginal businesses, and they're going to flow capital to those businesses that are attractive and offer a long-term return to the shareholder. The system works like that. Under a free enterprise society, it is always going to work like that, and it's the best by far compared to any other options anywhere in the world.
Well, we've watched what's going on over the years and never put no money into our plants. We're still the most profitable steel industry in the world. We made 6.7% return on our dollar, where Japan only made 1.6. But when you can make 23% in real estate, chemicals, transportation, now probably Marathon Oil, naturally you're going to get out of the steel industry. But we say they have a moral obligation. The goddamn steelworkers, they made their money off the steelworkers' back.
Many people don't fully appreciate that the primary role and the duty, I think, of management really is to make money. And in our case, our primary objective is not to make steel, it's to make steel profitably.
U.S. Steel celebrated the opening of a new high-rise office venture in downtown Pittsburgh within weeks of closing its Homestead Open Hearts.
This is a great day for U.S. Steel and its various divisions with roles in this project. It's the newest element of the Steel Plaza, where work will continue for another decade.
Some business analysts argue that such projects indicate a fundamental reorientation of American corporations, from manufacturing enterprises to financial conglomerates. These critics charge that American managers have become paper entrepreneurs. In 1982 alone, U.S. corporations spent more money buying each other than in net new manufacturing investment, more money suing each other than in basic research.
Managers who see their role as not one of building a company or building a market position, making a commitment to a particular industry, such a manager becomes somebody who in some remote office is essentially moving financial assets around on a financial chessboard. One European businessman told me that the American companies in his industry really didn't compete like companies. They competed like banks, that they were just essentially interested in buying and selling companies and not interested in producing and selling products.
American business has turned away from making useful products and useful services to essentially focusing on very short-term financial results. They see more opportunities in tax dodges, in mergers, than they do in the painfully slow process of developing new products, new ways of actually producing goods.
By concentrating on short-term profits, other American industries, auto for example, have also fallen behind in the long-term development of technology and manufacturing skill. For years, American automakers only made superficial modeling changes to their large luxury cars. They failed to invest in the fuel-efficient small car technologies the Japanese were perfecting. And now even America's high-tech industry, like steel, auto, and consumer electronics before it, is being starved of the long-term investments it needs to compete.
We have become so concerned with financial measures and financial evaluations that we are neglecting the basic underpinnings of our future success. Investment is essentially a self-fulfilling prophecy. If you don't believe a future exists, a good future exists, and therefore don't invest for it, there will be no future.
The American economy can no longer offer the high productivity, high wage jobs that were the basis for the American dream. A recent U.S. Labor Department study reveals that our traditional middle class of well-off blue-collar workers is shrinking. It is being replaced by poorly paid clericals, service workers, and the growing ranks of the permanently unemployed. Over the last decade, the average real wage of working Americans has actually dropped by 16%. And our per capita income, for years the highest in the world, has fallen to 10th today.
We have so long, so fervently believed in business that the business of America is business, as Calvin Coolidge said, and that the pursuit of profits somehow works out for the public good. In fact, what we're getting now is investment which rewards stockholders and senior executives and devastates the communities in which corporations operate.
U.S. Steel is getting out of the steel business, and they're getting out of this community. And they've raked it, and they've soaked it, and they're saying, goodbye, we had enough, there's no more left, we squeezed the grape, we're going on to greener pastures. And what we're saying is over our dead bodies. We know how to make steel, we've always made steel, and if they want to move on us, then we'll make it ourselves.
That's right, we'll make the steel. We are United States Steel. They're not making the steel, we are.
They pass papers around, we actually make the steel, and we know how to do it.
In 1979, steelworkers first demanded a voice in how their companies were run. When U.S. Steel announced that as part of its restructuring, it would lay off a further 13,000 nationwide, angry steelworkers stormed corporate headquarters. They trapped executives in their offices and challenged management's right to invest as they saw fit.
To have the nerve to say, we don't need you anymore. Well, we need our jobs. And we want the U.S. Steel Corporation to spend a few dollars out of the millions and millions that we made for them to spend it in their communities that we're from.
There's no way an American steelworker can take an old mill and be productive. They have to put the money that they made in those mills back into those mills, right in the cities where we build our homes, where we build our churches and our schools.
Maybe if the workers started taking over the plants, they'd come down and talk to us.
Are you advocating that?
You heard me.
This has to be the first step of a series of peaceful but firm and growing larger moves by steel workers and anyone else who cares, not just in Youngstown, not just in Pittsburgh, but all over America.
Last year, I've come to re-examine my thinking. And in order to survive, people are going to have to start re-looking over ideas that have failed and start taking new initiative for themselves. That's it.
I think we're very complacent. It's been not too easy to pack your lunchbox at night and go down to Mester United States Steel and put in your 8 hours work and come home and never think about it again. We have to start doing something for ourselves. We have to get totally involved with the running of companies now. I mean, it's going to take a long time. It's not going to be done overnight. But I think now's the time to start.
We have to abandon the 200-year-old American dream that somehow or other the exercise of selfishness in the form of profit-making accrues to the benefit of our children and our grandchildren. We've got to kick the habit of thinking that that's the way it works. How do we plan for a different alternative, something that takes into account the long-range needs not only for all of us in here today, but for our children and our grandchildren?
Pittsburgh area steelworkers, including Paul and Maureen Trout, met in workshops at the conference to explore grassroots alternatives to corporations' traditional control over investment.
Is to sell the assets for $300 million plus the unfunded pension liability.
It's going to be hard to change this into some other kind of specialty steel and still have the workers be able to afford to buy it.
Let me say that if there is one source of power that the workers need in this country, it's ownership of productive facilities on a democratic basis.
As long as you could assume the mill was going to be there forever, anyone who raised a question about investment decisions was some kind of crazy radical. Now that the investment decisions are taking the mills away, all of a sudden people are interested in all kinds of new ideas. Now we are, along with lots of other workers and community people across the country, groping our way into that area.
We propose to every citizen in the valley that the American dream be put to work in a fresh way. That dream, we believe, is about freedom from want. It is about self-help. It is about cooperation. It is about viable democracy.
We have asked...
Faced with the closure of Youngstown's largest mill and the layoff of 5,000 workers, a coalition of church, labor, and community groups formed to buy the mill and run it themselves.
A new form of community-owned and operated steel plant.
But in the face of steel industry opposition, the government denied them the loan guarantees needed to purchase the mill, and the plan failed. But 5 years later, when another major steel maker, National Steel, revealed it would make no further investments in its Weirton works, the 8,000 steel workers there were able to buy the mill. They agreed to wage cuts to repay the necessary bank loans and launched a $1 billion 10-year modernization program. Auto workers in New Jersey, meat packers in Iowa, employees of the nation's fastest-growing airline, even workers in California's Silicon Valley, are among the owners of thousands of American companies. As worker owners, they can take responsibility for seeing that adequate investment is made for the future of their jobs. A construction workers union in Florida is pioneering a different approach. They have invested their $200 million pension fund in mortgages for the troubled local housing industry. They've been able both to create jobs for unemployed union members and badly needed affordable housing for their communities. Worker pension funds, now approaching $1 trillion, are one way unions can go beyond their traditional wage and benefit demands and take the initiative in generating employment for their members. The state of Ohio is looking at public investment as yet another strategy for stimulating new job-producing industries. It has developed a plan for a publicly financed high-speed rail system linking the state's major cities. Patterned after European and Japanese models, the bullet train plan would create up to 50,000 jobs for Ohio's many unemployed blue-collar workers and provide $6.6 billion in new orders for the state's ailing economy. The plan does not simply try to prop up aging industries like steel, but to convert these industries to new, technologically advanced products which will provide jobs in the years ahead. Worker ownership, pension funds, public investment are at best stopgap answers to the nation's economic problems. They can only succeed if they lead to more fundamental changes in our economic institutions and priorities.
We have to look at the power of money and where it goes. We have to look at who has the right to say, where will we invest? And we cannot say, let U.S. Steel do what it wants with its profit as long as it makes money. We can no longer say, follow the dollar and follow profit and all will be well.
We said in the early 60s, people have to take part in the decisions which affect their lives. And we said that first about the right to vote in the South. And then we said that about the right to have a war declared over our heads, not by Congress, which had nothing to do with it, but for the president. And now we're having to address ourselves to these decision makers, whoever they are, in remote corporate boardrooms and the offices of investment banks, which make and break the Youngstowns and the Homesteads of this world between coffee and martinis.
Right now, one person standing by themselves can't accomplish anything. I mean, you need numbers to do anything. And maybe somebody's going to start listening to us.
We're from Tri-State, Conference on Steel. It's a good opportunity for all of us to have our voices heard.
I've never been involved in anything other than a brawny leader in my life. Sometimes I'm surprised at some of the things that I do.
If somebody would have told me 3 years ago that I'd be here in downtown Pittsburgh at a rally, I would have told them they were crazy. Well, this is a nice turnout here today. By the time we all start sticking together.
This land is your land. This land is my land. Even if you don't own land, even if you can't buy land, it ain't U.S. Steel land. Goddamn, it's my land.
Working Americans are just beginning to search for their own answers to our industrial decline. More and more, they are refusing to place their economic destiny solely in the hands of private corporations. They're seeking ways to gain real power over industrial change, to make the business of America the business of every American.
This land was made with you and me.
All I know is the way they run the country and our economy isn't working for us anymore. And it's not just the people who run the corporations, it's the little people too. Nobody cares about anybody else except themselves anymore. There has to be a new way. And I think we're just going to have to put our heads together and find it.